Vladimir Putin's soldiers face their frozen weapons as the bitter Ukrainian winter sweeps across the war-torn nation. The sub-zero temperatures were set to hit the Ukrainian army already fighting bravely against the Russian advance. With the ground freezing, conditions for Kiev and Moscow troops will worsen. One expert on war studies says the bitter temperatures will bring a new set of problems to the front. Dr. Marina Miron said, "Both sides have watched it get wet and cold in recent months. From a military point of view, this cold weather also poses tactical and operational problems. This is the period between freezing and getting wet. This type of environment is more complicated. From a military perspective, even the wet and cold presented tactical and operational problems. This is the period between freezing and getting wet. This type of environment is more complicated." One of those complexities was ensuring the troops in question were kept fit to fight. A lot more care was needed to ensure the troops were well fed, warm and equipped. All this reduces combat effectiveness, given the character of the war, namely the emphasis on artillery and trench warfare. It is important, but also more challenging, to keep combat units effective and motivated, as troops may be tempted to remain in protected positions. As well as troops, the colder weather will also have an impact on the equipment these troops use. As far as equipment is concerned, it may suffer under these conditions and is prone to break down. Water can penetrate and freeze equipment. The battery will lose a significant amount of capacity. Ammunition might get wet and freeze, and so on. Both sides will also increase their logistical footprint as they need more equipment, heat, food, etc., and fuel in cold weather conditions. Also, an established defensive position might be better than those who have to launch an attack. That said, we still see a lot of fighting in various places, especially around Bakhmut and Mariinka. In addition, it is worth mentioning that Russia, knowing that much depended on keeping troops warm and well supplied, targeted Ukraine's power grid. Miron said this was not only to punish the population, but also to make it more challenging to supply Ukrainian troops on the ground. Even though the Ukrainian ground, troops, and civilians may freeze over this winter, the fighting will continue to rage hot. Meanwhile, Russia is ready to negotiate with all parties involved in the war in Ukraine, but Kiev and its Western backers have refused to engage in talks. President Vladimir Putin said in an interview aired on Sunday, Russia's February 24th invasion of Ukraine has triggered the most deadly conflict in Europe since World War II, and the biggest confrontation between Moscow and the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The Kremlin says it will fight until all its aims are achieved, while Kiev says it will not rest until every Russian soldier is ejected from all of its territories, including Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. We are ready to negotiate with everyone involved about acceptable solutions, but that is up to them. We are not the ones refusing to negotiate. They are, Putin told Russia One state television in the interview. CIA Director William Burns said in an interview published this month that while most conflicts send in negotiation, Ditch's assessment was that Russia was not yet serious about a real negotiation to end the war. An advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Putin needed to return to reality and acknowledge that it was Russia that did not want any negotiations. Russia single-handedly attacked Ukraine and is killing citizens, Mykola Podolyak said on Twitter. Russia doesn't want negotiations, but tries to avoid responsibility. Putin said Russia was acting in the right direction in Ukraine because the West led by the United States, was trying to cleave Russia apart. Washington denies it is plotting Russia's collapse. I believe that we are acting in the right direction. We are defending our national interests, the interests of our citizens, our people, and we have no other choice but to protect our citizens, Putin said, asked if the geopolitical conflict with the West was approaching a dangerous level. Putin said, "I don't think it's so dangerous." Putin said the West had begun the conflict in Ukraine in 2014 by toppling a pro-Russian president in the Maidan Revolution protests. Soon after that revolution, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, and Russian-backed separatist forces began fighting Ukraine's armed forces in eastern Ukraine. Actually, the fundamental thing here is the policy of our geopolitical opponents, which is aimed at pulling apart Russia. Historical Russia, Putin said. Putin casts what he calls a special military operation in Ukraine as a watershed moment when Moscow finally stood up to a Western bloc he says has been seeking to destroy Russia since the 1991 fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine and the West say Putin has no justification for what they cast as an imperial-style war of occupation that has sown suffering and death across Ukraine. Putin described Russia as a unique country and said the vast majority of its people were united in wanting to defend it. As for the main part, the 99.9% of our citizens, our people who are ready to give everything for the interests of the mother, and there is nothing unusual for me here, Putin said. This just once again convinces me that Russia is a unique country and that we have exceptional people. This has been confirmed throughout the history of Russia's existence.